Hello, thank you for joining me. This is my first day sharing vocal readings of the passages most prominent to me and my synthesis of the focus topics from Book 31 in my Book Week series, Alan Watts' Beyond Theology, The Art of Godmanship. Before I share my vocal readings today, I want to talk a little bit about my recent thoughts on perspective and the many different perspectives that we can view our circumstances from. There are so many. And I think of a very specific imagery when I consider this. I think of a lens through which I am viewing or examining my screen of experience, and I consider what may be, what may happen if I pulled that lens back. And I often ask myself the question, how far might I need to pull this lens back in order to see a larger harmony here? As I study, I am able to apply what I learn more and more to my day-to-day circumstances. What I note is that pulling back my lens such that I can see the broader harmony is something that when I'm dealing with the acute squeeze physiologically of my human form, it can be time consuming. And in that moment, sometimes I feel that I don't have the time for that. As an active mother and wife, I am often working with a schedule and time constraints and deadlines. And so I recognize that there is something that I've been capable of doing in the past. I again ask myself that question, how far would I have to pull my lens back in order to see the broader harmony that is inherent, no matter how inharmonious I feel at the moment? And just asking myself that question at this point, considering that I have successfully pulled that lens back time and time again, if I don't have time to do it at that moment, just the memory that it's possible is enough to trigger the opening of my diaphragm, to trigger a spaciousness or what feels at the moment like a cocooning around my situation, such that even though I feel I'm squeezed and I can't breathe, I remember that I can. It's just a small little trigger that allows an emergence of a fork in the road that I didn't see before. I thought, before I saw that fork in the road, my perception in human form was that there was only one road. Suddenly, that trigger opens up a fork in the road. Of course, I know that I don't want to slide down the pathway toward further squeezing, however lubricated it is and easy to slide down it is. I want to further enrich the opening of a new pathway for myself to the eternal now. And so once I see that fork in the road, it's almost enough to have the trigger of memory that a larger landscape is available somewhere. And I'm able to lean into that knowing. Breathe. Literally bring oxygen into my human form such that I can continue maneuvering toward that deadline or toward that solution for my almost 5-year-old daughter Um, and I'm capable of understanding that I will, of course, pull that lens back and see the broader landscape. As it happens, oftentimes when I do this, what happens next is triggered by my laughter, a little bit of comedy that inevitably inserts itself. That is, we're so deserving of access to, of remembering what I believe to be this peekaboo game of hide and seek that we are playing with ourselves. This rhythm into tightening of a rubber band in finite form, that squeeze in the what can feel so acute in our human circumstances, of resistance to sensations that don't feel optimal at the time. And that little bit of comedy, remembering the game that I'm playing with myself, is often enough to fast forward that movement of my lens back toward the larger landscape. And inevitably what I see there is this beautiful harmony that I don't understand in cognitive form. And suddenly, every time I see that, I recognize that I don't need to understand it. Understanding almost becomes irrelevant. Without further ado, I'm going to wrap this around to my first reading for the day. This is from page 38. And it's in reference to karma. This is why I bring it up first. Why and how does the reincarnating individual first go wrong? Responsibility for one's own suffering cannot be attributed to the individual as we know and see him superficially. For at this level, the individual, whether adult or infant, seems far more the victim than the agent of his agony. We must therefore imagine a new kind of individuality in which there are two spheres with a common center. The outer sphere is the finite consciousness, the ego, the superficial individual, which believes itself to be the willing agent and knower, or the passive sufferer of deeds and experience. But the inner sphere is the real self, unknown to the conscious ego. For the latter is the temporary disguise or dream of the former. And the real self would not only be unafraid of entering into dreams of intense suffering, it would all the time be experiencing the process as delight and bliss, as an eternal game of hide and seek. I'll move on toward further readings now. Enjoy. Page 4. Herein, quite simply, is the origin of man's poignant sense of individuality, of being uniquely alone, and of having an existence which is mysteriously lost and problematic. He's kicked out of paradise, because paradise is having a connection, roots in the garden, stem from the branch, current to the light. To be unaware of the connection is to have one's heart in the wrong place, far out in the fruit, instead of within, in the tree. It is to feel that one's basic self is isolated within the body's envelope of skin, forgetting that the self is the whole circulating current from which embodiments come and go season after season, endless variations upon one theme. Page 6. Western cultures have bred a type of human being who feels strongly alienated from everything which is not his own consciousness. He's a stranger both to the external world and to his own body. And in this sense, he has lost his connection with the surrounding universe He does not know that the ultimate inside of himself is the same as the ultimate inside of the cosmos. Or that, in other words, his sensation of being I is a glimmering intimation of what the universe itself feels like on the inside. He's been taught to regard everything outside human skins as so much witless mechanism which has nothing whatsoever in common with human feelings and values. And this style of man must therefore see himself as the ghastly and tragic accident of sensitive and intelligent tissue caught up in the cosmic toils like a mouse in a cotton gin. Page 7. Mastery in nature consists in evolving an individual organism so unique and so autonomous that it almost appears to be a separate universe. Such is human personality at its best. Actually, however well concealed, the clue is always there. For if the connection were in fact to dissolve, the illusion of the separate individual would likewise vanish. Westerners are not the only people who feel that they are disconnected individuals out there on their own, but they are the only people who brag about it. And this is because the isolated style of individuality has a highly positive value in their religious and philosophical traditions. Page 9. Ecology must take the view that where the organism is intelligent, the environment also is intelligent, because the two evolve in complexity together and make up a single unified field of behavior. Page 10. What we need is a new kind of theological critique. Not a polemic, not a debunking, not even a restatement in contemporary terms. We need a natural history of theology, wherein the development of religious ideas and practices is studied, not as something good for life or bad for it, but as a form of life itself, like a particular species of flower or bird. Page 17. At the mythic level, Hinduism asserts that all experience whatsoever is God's, and that God is the one and only knower and seer. All multiplicity, all sensations of limited and separate individuality, of the duality of here and there, I and thou, are God's dream, or Maya, a word that signifies not only illusion, but also art and miraculous power. The universe is therefore conceived as God's game, Leela, of hide and seek with himself, such that all beings are simply the masks of the one divine self, Atman. Page 19. God himself is literally amazed at and in his own work. Were it otherwise, it would certainly be no fun to be God. But amazement means, among other things, getting deliberately lost. And this would naturally involve God's finding himself in a position where he seems not to be God at all, but merely a creature. Page 22. Is anyone absolutely sure that the world is Maya? That he himself is, deep down, the dreaming Godhead? That death is a change of scene? And that the choice between endless glory and endless horror is just a device for making things thrilling? Isn't it just possible that such ideas as these may be the most insidious hallucinations, the most persuasive and corrupting temptations of that archfiend and enemy of creation, the devil? No one, not even, I think, the Godhead, is absolutely sure. For to be is courage, and to know is nerve. The answer is always yes, no, because existence itself is a vibratory or wave-like affair, and now you see it, now you don't. A back, front, up, down, here, there situation, like a mountain or wave with its upside and its downside, clearly different from each other, and yet inseparable. To be quite sure, to be set, fixed, and firm, is to miss the point of life. For living and being is a perpetual abandonment of the known and fixed situation. The only true peace is the always slightly uncertain apprehension that no will imply yes, just as much as yes implies no. Page 27. We should never forget that all our ideas of the universe, whether theological, metaphysical, or scientific, are anthropomorphic, being translations of the way things are into the terminology of the human brain. Thus, to think of God as necessary being or as the organic pattern of the universe can be much closer to idolatry than thinking of him as the old gentleman upon the golden throne, or as the many-armed and many-faced dancer who's playing as the world. Another advantage of this imagery is that it enables us to discuss theological problems in a lively and dramatic way that is intelligible to people at many different levels of intelligence and of many different kinds of intelligence. Page 32. If the Lord is absolutely serious, things are very bad. Not only does he confront his creatures with severe moral demands, he also fits them out with lusty, hungry, and highly sensitive bodies, liable to cancer, bubonic plague, arthritis, decayed teeth, and stomach ulcers. He flings them into a world containing mosquitoes, sharks, tapeworms, piranha fish, staphylococci, and other people. He puts them into a situation in which it has, on the whole, required considerable effort not to get involved in tortures and burnings, whether judicial or accidental, in wars, murders, and robberies, and in the weird emotional tangles that come from having a brain which finds it a necessary advantage to predict a mostly dreaded future. On top of this, he's alleged to threaten those who disobey his commandments with the most exquisitely painful tortures ever devised, to endure for always and always without rest. Page 33. In the imagery of Hinduism, the hard reality of the world confronting us is, as we've seen, Leela, play, and Maya, magical illusion. Shiva dances the universe, surrounded with flames and flashing terrors, but one of his many hands is held upright with palm open to the spectator. The meaning is fear not. This performance is a big act. The solidity of the rocks is an electrical mirage. The body is a whirlpool, constant only in appearance, but actually a stream of changes. And pain, the very touchstone of reality, since we pinch ourselves to be sure that we're not dreaming, is a hypnotic state which can be switched on or off at will. Page 34. If there is a man of such spiritual courage as to call the Lord's bluff, what he's actually refusing to believe, what he will not take seriously, is not the Lord, but his Maya. He will not admit that agony and tragedy, that death and hell, fear and nothingness are ultimate realities. Above all, he's not admitting the final reality of separateness, of the seeming distinction between man and cosmos, creature and creator. Page 36. I cannot conceive any better way of trying to understand myself or human nature in general than a thorough exploration of my desires, making them as specific as possible, and then asking myself whether that is actually what I want. Page 41. I've suggested that hide and seek or lost and found is the fundamental form of play because at root, being is vibration. It is a state of yes, no, solid space, here, there, positive, negative, come, go, inside, outside, symbolized in the fundamental up-down motion of the wave. Rhythm lies at the heart of play, and thus various rhythmic actions are the primordial forms of delight. Birdsong, the chirping of crickets, the beating of hearts, the pulsation of laughter, the ecstatic loss of self in drumming and dancing, the sonorous vibrations of voices and strings and bells. Absorption and rhythm can go on until energy fails. For when we survey the various cultures of mankind, it appears there's nothing men would rather do than be lost all night in rhythm. Page 46. I must consider this crucial question. Do I want it arranged so that when I awaken to my true self, the old ego is simply to evaporate? If I could awaken at some point before my death, the two identities would naturally run together. On the surface, I would remember my name, address, and telephone number, and recollect quite clearly that for all practical purposes, that is, for carrying on a particular social game, I'm still a limited individuality called Alan Watts. But concentric with this outward persona, this mask, I would be vividly aware that my basic identity, apprehended rather than comprehended, was the eternal self of all selves. And after death, am I quite sure that I could be reconciled to the ultimate disappearance of this precious Alan Watts game in which I have invested so much time and energy? This is always a hard question for a young person, for he's not at that point in the rhythm of mortal time where he's ready to give up. He's set to continue as a matter of biological necessity, for the action of living requires follow-through like the blow of the hand upon a drum. It aims beyond the skin